College football week 3 is here. Chad, it's a very exciting time. The 12-team playoffs are here. Every team is still alive. Somehow, even Notre Dame, after losing to Northern Illinois, still can make the college football playoff. It's a very exciting time. A couple teams starting to separate themselves from the pack. The Georgias, the Texases, Ohio States of the world, looking very, very strong. You know, a team that normally would be mentioned in that list, Alabama, got a new coach, got a lot of new players this year, and they're heading on the road to Wisconsin, Camp Randall Stadium, 16-point favorites. Do they show the world, do they show the Big Ten why they should be considered in that upper echelon of teams?
I think so. We've discussed this a little bit offline, but this week is kind of a strange week, right? Nothing really popped out. So I'm going to have to go with kind of my gut. And I'm going to use an annoying term that we're probably sick of hearing here, but this just feels like a trap. 16 and a half. Feels like it should probably be bigger with such a big Alabama squad going up against Big Ten guys like Wisconsin. So 16 is a good number, I think. I'm going to pick up on what I think is going to be a pretty big, heavy public sentiment going with Bama here. But we're playing at Wisconsin. Wisconsin traditionally has a pretty good offensive line. Wisconsin traditionally produces NFL caliber running backs. And I think that Fickle has a team that he likes this year. I think that they, it kind of appears in the first couple games that they got off to a little bit of a slow start, but I'm looking for them to pick up this week, and I'm looking for them to run the ball. I'm looking for them to run some clock out, and for that reason, I think that it's going to be a little bit closer just by way of clock management. That 3 touchdowns is going to be a lot to overcome, even for this Alabama squad led by DeBauer.
I agree with you that Wisconsin traditionally does have great offensive line and traditionally does have great running game. But this year does seem to be a little bit worse in that than every other year. They obviously brought in Luke Fickell. He ran an air raid type scheme. But last year, he still ran the ball plenty with Braylon Allen and Chez Meluzzi. Well, now Braylon Allen is gone, and he brought in Phil Longo as the new offensive coordinator, who was at University of North Carolina. He also runs an air raid type scheme. So I think we're starting to see Wisconsin try to filter out that run-heavy approach and go to a more pass-heavy attack, which I hate for this game against Alabama. I would love to see them leverage the offensive line and play to their strengths, and I don't really see them doing so, at least so far this season. I'm not in love with Tyler Van Dyke as a quarterback. The only real thing that would make me want to go towards Wisconsin here is the fact that it's at home in a big-time game where they're getting 16 points. I think the fans are going to be super hyped. I mean, if you can't get hyped up for this game as a member of the team against Alabama, then what game are you going to get hyped up for? So I think it's a very tricky line. I think 17 points is probably around. We're going to see either a 14 or 17 point Bama win. So it's like, which one is it going to be? I would maybe lean towards Bama just because I'm not convinced that Wisconsin is going to use the run game super hard. But if they do decide to play that way, I would not be surprised if they can keep this very, very close. All right, sticking in the SEC, Texas A&M heading to the Swamp, taking on Florida. Florida is plus 4.5 here, and I'm riding with them, even with a true freshman quarterback, DJ Lagway, making his second start now for the Gators. Graham Mertz was out last week, and Lagway came in and said, I'll just put up 400 yards as the passer, no big deal. I know it wasn't against like the highest quality of competition, but doing that as a true freshman versus anybody is a great sign. Now they're at home. The crowd is going to be super hyped. It's in SEC play, and they're taking on a Texas A&M team that lost outright at home to Notre Dame. They looked horrific in that game. Connor Wegman could not throw the ball at all. And I think a lot of people were like, all right, you know what? Notre Dame is good. They got a great defense. It kind of is what it is. Well, now last week, what did Notre Dame do? They went out and lost to Northern Illinois at home. So this Texas A&M loss looks even worse now in retrospect for them. I think Florida is going to be super hyped up. I like the way that this DJ Lagway plays. He's a top prospect for a reason. I'm going to take the points at home in a competitive SEC matchup.
Yeah, this is, again, one of those that I've gone back and forth. I'd like Mike Elko. I'd like the direction that A&M's going this year and moving forward. And the A&M defense has had some streaks in the last couple of weeks of showing a little bit of strength, but this just feels like a must-win for Billy Napier, right? I mean, if Billy Napier's going to keep his job, they've got to win this game, in my opinion. And like you mentioned last week, 632 yards of total offense out of a true freshman. Yes, it was against Samford, but sometimes you just need to see one go in to have a little confidence going forward. So again, another game, points at home, big conference matchup. I like Florida plus 4.5.
Well, from Florida with their star true freshman, we go to my favorite team, the Indiana Hoosiers, my alma mater. Surprisingly, 3-point favorites at UCLA in the Rose Bowl. That's right. Indiana is favored in the Rose Bowl, and I'm not going to phrase it any differently. I obviously love us to cover. I may be a little bit biased. What do you think?
Well, I appreciate letting me have this week. I mentioned seeing one go in, and I think this is our best shot this week. I really like Indiana -3. Earlier this season, we said that UCLA had to play a perfect non-conference schedule in order to hit their over, and they just narrowly escaped Hawaii. I mean, it was a eye-bleeding game to watch. 16-13 finish, just barely beat them. And meanwhile, Indiana has been doing what they're supposed to do against FIU and Western Illinois, putting up huge numbers. They scored over 100 points in 2 games this year, which you're probably aware of this. That's not really the Indiana way in the football scene. So that's been really exciting to watch. And I really like what Curtis Rourke's doing. I really like what Justice Ellison's doing for Indiana. They've looked awesome, again, against FIU and Western Illinois. But if you have to perform, and that's what they've been doing. So I'm taking Indiana. It's equal parts. Indiana's looked good, and UCLA just hasn't.
Yeah, Indiana was the highest scoring team in all of college football last week with 77 points. And I don't care that it was against Western Illinois because plenty of other big time programs also faced cupcakes and didn't put up nearly the kind of offensive stats that IU did. But you hit the nail on the head. We, in our previews video on the BroThrow YouTube channel, if you want to check that out from the futures, we were on UCLA team total under, and they haven't done anything to prove me otherwise. Indiana has gone out, looked really, really good. UCLA's defense, I think, has been fine. That's a little bit to be expected. Obviously, they had a strong defense last year, but I just don't see them being able to hang with Indiana offensively. Ethan Garbers has not looked all that good, could not put up a lot of points against Hawaii. I'll actually give a little bit of credit for UCLA against that Hawaii game because they held them to so few points going up against a veteran quarterback in Braden Schrager. But now you got Curtis Rourke, who is just as veteran with way better weapons surrounding him, with a way better coaching staff. I just don't see UCLA competing in this game, frankly. I think Indiana is really, really good play here. Speaking of teams that haven't been competing, let's talk about Florida State. I did mention earlier in the video that every team is still alive for the playoffs. I may be wrong with Florida State. 0-2 to start the season after being ranked in the top 10 preseason. And it's been, really a cacophony of errors on all sides. Offense, defense, special teams. But obviously the biggest standout is quarterback DJ Uyunglele. He was a big-time transfer. They paid him over $1 million in NIL money, and he just looks horrific. He looks like not just bad for $1 million quarterback. He just looks bad, period. He looks like he should be benched. He looks like he can't make throws. He can't make reads. And Florida State's defense is not really helping them out, getting big stops with them in close field position. DJ looked bad at Clemson, but then went to Oregon State and looked a lot better. So I thought he was going to come in and play that type of style that he learned from Oregon State. And I think we're seeing now that it's clearly all the coach, Jonathan Smith, maybe even some of the running back, Damian Martinez, who was a stud last year. But Memphis has been a very, very solid overall team. Seth Hennigan is a senior. He's got his top 2 receivers back from last year, Taylor and Blankumsey. And this is a team that, if you are not careful, will beat you over the top and can put up a lot of points. And I just don't see Florida State scoring a lot of points in any game this year, period. Would they have had better chances going against worse competition than Boston College and Georgia Tech? Maybe, but regardless of the fact that those teams got ranked after those games, I think a lot of that's due to they beat Florida State, not necessarily these are top level teams. So I'm going to ride Memphis plus 6.5 here. Maybe I'm a sucker for just wanting to fade Florida State with how bad they've looked, but I just can't bet on DJ anymore.
Yeah, no, I'm going to ride the DJ Stinks train with you. Nothing personal. He just hasn't shown us anything. I mean, he's just not been able to get the ball out of his hands and into the receiver's hands. They just haven't been able to score points. Meanwhile, Memphis, being led by Ryan Silverfield, they've scored points. They've looked pretty good. You mentioned Seth Hennigan and his wide receiver weapons. Mario Anderson's also looked great too. So these guys are putting up stats, and I think it's going to be, maybe a money line play. Probably not. I'm a few units down, obviously, this year. So I'm going to try and play this smart, and I'm going to roll with Memphis with you plus 6.5.
Well, the team that Florida State lost outright to last week, Boston College, now in the rankings, very surprising. Bill O'Brien has got his team into the rankings after only 2 games. Very impressive coaching job for him. Can't imagine he's going to stay at Boston College long. I think a lot of big programs We'll be taking a look at him with his early success, cough, cough, Michigan. But they're heading to Missouri to take on a top-ranked team in the Tigers, giving up 16.5 points. What do you see here in this SEC-ACC ranked matchup?
Well, I think that, Mizzou over the last few years has really been kind of surprising. They've been really strong. They finished really strong last year. They've got Brady Cook returning. They've got Marcus Carroll, who transferred in, I think, from Georgia State, I think. But Marcus Carroll, Nate Noel, that 1-2 punch that they've got in the backfield, they've just got a lot of weapons. They're putting up tons of points, and they are giving up 0. They have not allowed a point this year. Now, that is important. They've played Murray State and they've played Buffalo, but, they got it done. And now they're going up against, like you mentioned, Bill O'Brien and his NFL-style offense, who's had great success pretty much everywhere he's gone. And so I do think this is going to be the biggest test for them, but I just think that Mizzou is going to be too big, too fast, and they're going to score too many points for BC to keep up.
Yeah, this is a really tricky spot for me because BC has obviously looked good, but as I said in Florida State, how much of that can we contribute to Boston College being good versus Florida State maybe being bad? But I think you got to put the point that you kind of hit the nail on the head when you said Bill O'Brien has really been successful everywhere he's been. And I think people don't really realize that because of his head coaching stint with the Houston Texans, right? Obviously, that was not the best result for him, but literally everywhere else, he's had tons of success. And let's not forget, this is a guy who has been a top coordinator for Nick Saban, Bill Belichick, the biggest minds, the best minds in all of football. He's coming in, he's bringing this team into the modern NFL style offense. I think they got too many weapons on Boston College to keep it close. Mizzou is, they got Luther Burden and Brady Cook, probably one of, if not the best quarterback wide receiver combos in the country. But I give Boston College a coaching advantage here because of Bill O'Brien, and I think I'm going to lean towards them on the plus 16.5.
Oh, snap.
Well, the last game of the day, I think this is also one we might disagree on. LSU heading to South Carolina. 7-point road favorites for LSU, but I'm going to ride them. South Carolina had a great game last week against Kentucky, but Kentucky has not been very impressive this year. I think they made a lot of mistakes and a lot of turnovers that gave them a bunch of short fields that I don't think LSU is going to give to South Carolina. The biggest issue with LSU last year was their defense. And they went out and against USC, their defense looked really solid. They held them to under 30 points. The game was like a 65, something like that, over under. It was, under 50 points total. Nussmeier, I think, definitely has some things to work on, but as the season progresses, he should get better and better, get a better connection with those new receivers to replace Neighbors and Brian Thomas. And I think it's because of the strength of LSU's defense that is a little bit underrated that I'm riding with them here, even on the road. I think they get it done against a South Carolina team that's going to be very overrated, beating Kentucky.
Yeah, I've actually changed my position on this. I went back and looked at some notes last night. Talked to a couple people who hate South Carolina, a couple Clemson buddies of mine. SC, we said, looked terrible week 1, and then they appeared to bounce back in a routing of Kentucky. But when you peel back those layers a little bit, they had 250 total yards of offense, and Sellers put the ball on the ground 3 times, and they still beat them. So, LSU gave up 21 points against Nicholls State. I'm going to give a little shout out here to the alum Doug Hudson. Smallest hands of any drafted QB in NFL history. What's up, Doug? That being said, like you said, LSU's defense was a little bit of an issue last year, but they have looked pretty good. And I think that this LSU front is really going to be much bigger and much better than the first 2 opponents that USC or SC has faced. So my numbers say to play South Carolina here, but I'm gonna roll with you on LSU. I just think that LSU is going to have too much for SC to handle.
Well, if you want to ride with us on LSU, Indiana, or any of the other picks in this video, go to BroThrow.com and use the sign-up code YouTube to get registered today to be able to place your first bet to get plus 100 odds on every single bet this weekend and going forward for college football, NFL, MLB, NBA, and more. But Chad, that is going to do it for this week 3 edition of the College Football Bro Show. Appreciate you coming in, giving picks. Anything else you want to leave our viewers with before we go?
Just good luck. Sweep your slate this week, guys.
Absolutely. Let's make some money. We will see you all in the next one. Peace.
Peace.